Ruslan.
All right, one of the most common questions we get asked is profanity a sin? Is cussing a sin? I flip-flopped on this position just to be fully transparent. I probably flip-flopped multiple times, and I thought it'd be fun to bring some smarter guys, some guys with some different views. I have not talked to any of them about what their actual views on this topic are. I got some scripture pulled up, and so this shall be fun. So, we have with us right now Pastor Trey Van Camp, Pastor Roy Dockery, and Jason Mayfield. Amazing content creators, amazing ministers. And we're going to jump right into it. Guys, profanity, talk to me. What do you guys think? I got a couple passages pulled up.
It doesn't bother me like it used to.
Okay.
I'll say that. I don't want to go as far to say I'm pro profanity. Well, I don't know. Sometimes I think if I could cuss when I preach, I could be far more effective.
It doesn't bother you, but
doesn't bother me.
Is it a sin?
Well, I mean, from a theological standpoint, I don't think it is.
Oh, wow. Okay. Talk to me.
I think it's a pragmatic thing or just a practice that we put on people. The problem is a lot of what we use to talk about that, let no unwholesome talk come out of your mouth, Ephesians 4:29, stuff like that. Number one, it's so subjective, it moves. I remember the first time I ever heard a pastor say fart, and I was like, In the last 20 years, the word piss has moved from profanity to just a word everybody says, and so I think, and if you'd like me to, I can list out all of the cuss words right now that I know, just like a pop quiz. But I think, I don't know. I think theologically, most of what you read, like, especially like Ephesians 4:29, it's not talking about the language you use. It's about the spirit of the words you say.
Okay.
So just for instance, I actually tell this story in one of my Ephesians chapter 3 videos on my channel, and I cuss on my channel. So there's a promotion right there. I cuss in the video. You can go watch it. It's great, but you got to watch all the chapter 3 videos. I don't remember where it is, or chapter 4 videos. And so Ephesians 4:29, I'm in a church one day. Okay. Pastor gets done preaching, service is over. Guy stops me in the foyer and he says, "Man, you know what? I love Pastor Randy. I'm just not sure about the stuff he's been preaching. I don't know that we're on target. I don't know that we're where we need to go." Guy never cussed, but he's talking down about the preacher. I go to Walmart because I stayed at church all day on Sunday because we did a rehearsal in the middle of the day, and then we did a Sunday night service and the whole thing. So I go to Walmart to grab some food, come back to the church. I'm in the Walmart parking lot, and this big lady who had just gotten saved stops me in the parking lot. She's having a religious experience because she ain't ever seen a preacher at Walmart. Okay. So she's in the zone right now. So she sees me and she goes, the lead pastor was Pastor Jerry. And she looks at me and she goes, "I'm going to tell you something. Pastor Jerry is the SHIT. And you want to know something? She cussed, but she said it in the spirit that's in line with what Ephesians 4:29 says. It was for the upbuilding. It was for the encouraging of the believer. And so she was in line with the spirit of what Ephesians 4:29 said. And the guy at the church wasn't, and he never said one cuss word.
Okay. So we're going to go to Ephesians 4:29. It's very interesting.
I think that's the reference.
Yeah, no, you're right. We're going to pull up the passages. We're going to look at the scriptures, guys. Relax. Some of you guys are just very, your panties in a bun. Relax. What Jason's position is, more or less, is what he's saying is because words are subjected to cultural nuance, to the timing. A word like crap was considered a cuss word 60 years ago. Now we say crap. Gosh darn it is a filler of a so much of this stuff is kind of subjected to context, timing, what's going on in society, and so who really kind of decides what words? And he's specifically with the word SHIT, saying it was used not in a way to demean. So that's an interesting position. In terms of words and context, Pastor Roy, I feel like you always get this question as an African-American man, as a black man, when it comes to the N-word, right? This is a word that was used negatively, and people always want to rehash it and say, well, why do black people say the N-word? And, is that right? And that whole deal. So can you chime in on this and kind of share your perspective on maybe that word specifically or the entire conversation?
If they want to hear my opinion on whether or not people should say the N-word, they can go watch that YouTube video that's on my channel from a couple months ago. But it's so for me, right? Like there's language, right? And then and so we use language for different reasons, and that's fine. That's kind of what Jason was saying. But I think when we look at the intention of what's being said, like we try to define profanity based on what we think is wrong, and then that, like we've been saying, that evolves with culture, right? So when we're talking about unwholesome words and babble and in the things that come out of our mouths, like it's a lot of it, especially when you talk about cursing, is about the relationship with how those words are being levied against other people, right? So there are a lot of people who don't use what we would culturally determine to be profanity in your comment section, right? But then say curse words that are cursing people, that someone's going to hell.
Yes.
That, oh, you believe that you're going to hell. When people say stuff like, I mean, and the one that I use just because of the community that I deal with, when people say stuff like, you're going to be just like your daddy when you grow up, you're not going to amount to anything. Right? Like when I think of the curses that were spoken over my life because of where I grew up, because of my family being involved with drug dealing and gangbanging and all of that stuff, that I was going to be like them, like that was those were curses spoke on me. But there was nothing that we would consider to be profanity. Now, I want to say I am anti-profanity in creative endeavors. So I know you got a lot of rappers in your community. I feel like rappers that cuss are just cheating, and it's easy from a language perspective for you to rhyme those words. So I'm anti-profanity from an intellectual language use because it's an easy way to express things, right? And so for me, it's just. And somebody said that, like, all in the comments, they were like, all curse words have anger behind them. I don't necessarily agree with that. But I do think we tend to use curse words. And so I'm against profanity and curse words in the regard of it actually stops us from truly expressing what we're trying to say.
Okay. It stops us.
Words.
Okay.
Right. They're opt-outs, right? So they're shortcut words where we don't say what we really mean, right? When you stub your toe, when you say Jiminy Christmas, what you really want to say is, man, I really just hurt my toe. It's throbbing. Like, just explain yourself. And so I think it creates like emotionally charged interactions because we're trying to create shortcuts and it doesn't help us communicate effectively.
Interesting.
But, so from a rapper perspective, for all the rappers out there, stop ending all of your 4-bar lines with the same cuss word, because that's just cheating and it's not creative. So, yeah.
Interesting. Okay, interesting. So let me just push back for a second, because I do agree with you guys that you could definitely curse someone out without ever using a 4-letter curse word, right? You could definitely do that. And that has been done. And some of y'all do that all the time. And some of you guys are doing that right now in the comments and in the chat as you're disagreeing with us about cursing. You're literally cursing at us, right? You're not saying anything building up. You're literally speaking curses. However, when it comes to specifically the words that our culture considers cuss words or profanity, doesn't that kind of come off like a whataboutism? Doesn't that kind of come off like a, yeah, but what about, right? Like, and I agree with the what about, by the way, but doesn't that kind of come off like we're pointing to something else wrong while not really dealing with what's being wrong? I like Jason's example, by the way. I think that was actually a good example for what he described. Let's go to Trey and let's see what he thinks, because maybe Trey will disagree with you guys, because I feel like
Trey cusses like a sailor.
I don't believe you. I do not believe you. Go ahead, Trey.
So actually, just to throw my dad under the bus.
Okay.
So he was in construction his whole life.
Okay.
So the whole phrase "cuss like a sailor." Well, there's also "cuss like a construction worker." And so I grew up around language a lot. But my mom has constantly said she is shocked. To this day, I've never cussed. I just don't. I just decided in my heart, even when I'm alone, I just don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
But a couple of things. I want to go at it from a leadership perspective, but also evangelistically. Like when I look at my time in high school with my friends, I really regret that I got on my friends for their language. I was like trying to really be this great gospel believing, great Christian that is sharing the gospel at all times. And so I really focused on people's behaviors a lot, especially like on my basketball team. I'm like, I was Captain America, right? Where, calling people out for cussing. So that was me. And I was like, I'm such a good person. Well, that was dumb. There's a lot other issues to talk about. And I think I created walls. Thankfully, I think God graciously used I've been able to share the gospel to a lot of those people, and I think a lot of it came out to be good. But that was just such a dumb wall that I built around my friends for no reason.
Yes.
I mean, there's so many, like I've learned that in pastoral ministry, everybody's got issues and you got to start prioritizing. And to me, language is not high on the list. So that's what I think about right away. But I also think we need to really talk about what are cuss words, because in the church world, I have been more hurt by church language, churchy people than I've ever been by non-Christians.
That's good.
Flattery for, that hurts. I know what they're doing. Gossip, manipulation, anger outburst, using their anxiety, manipulating the room. That needs to be called out.
Come on.
That needs to be rebuked. That is somebody, and I think it's the two reasons I think people use language inappropriately. It's either out of insincerity or insecurity. And so it's really trying to figure out, okay, is this person just insincere and just a jerk to be a jerk? Or is he really insecure? He doesn't have knowledge. He doesn't have better words to use. And he's trying to make his presence known. So as a Jesus follower, it's okay. I'm going to acknowledge him. I'm not going to, allow that kind of behavior. And if it's a lot of, pull him aside or whatever. But I think looking at the heart, why is this person using all this kind of language? What kind of attention does this person need?
That's good. So
that's kind of when I hear people talk that way, I think that's more of it. Is this person just insincere or is he insecure?
Okay, I like that. So what I like about what Jason is saying is that he's not disagreeing with the guys. He's saying, hey, where is the priority in line of this? So let me read a couple of scriptures to you guys. I'll share my view of this and how it's evolved. As I walked more with Jesus, I came across this passage, Philippians 3:8. Indeed, I count everything as lost because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord. For his sake I've suffered loss of all things and count them as rubbish in order that I may gain Christ. Now, when you look up that word rubbish, some scholars sometimes would say that word is closer to like crap or poop, right? Or even more intense, right? And then there's some intense language that Jesus uses, right? And so when we have then looked at this passage, which is the passage many of us like to go to, which is Ephesians 5:4. Let there be no filthiness, nor foolish talking, nor crude joking, which are out of place. Instead, let there be thanksgiving. And the entire passage is just talking about Christian conduct in general, right? And then he goes on to say about sexual immorality, let one who stole steal no longer, right? But the thing about that passage is they talk about no filthiness, no foolish talk, no crude joking. That's the one that people like to go to when talking about four-letter words. What they don't do is they don't go a couple verses back and actually read the passage we're kind of all alluding to, which is Ephesians 4:28, which says, let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as good for building up as it fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. And then the verse right after that says, and do not grieve the Spirit of God, by whom you were sealed for the day of redemption. And then it goes on to say about bitterness and wrath and anger and slander. Listen up, all you keyboard warriors in the comments section, right? Slander be put away from you, along with all malice. So when we look at that passage in context, it's way more than just four-letter words, specifically four-letter words that our society deems inappropriate. And then this passage will be the last passage. I'll tell you guys my opinion right here. This is passage Matthew 12:36. He says, I tell you, this is Jesus speaking, I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will give an account for every careless word they speak, for by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. This is my position. I'd like to hear what you guys think, because this is what I think. My position was initially, it's not that big of a deal. Hey, there's worse things out there people could say, Oh, and by the way, there are some instances of very strong language in scripture. Maybe it's it's okay to use it to make a point, right? Maybe it's appropriate to use it when trying to make a point, when speaking in a certain context. My position since becoming a father has changed and evolved, just because I don't use profanity, because I don't want my son using profanity, right? And I don't want to say something with my friend group privately on the basketball court in the gym and then slip up and say something in front of him. And one of my biggest values is to have integrity, be one person, be consistent. From a theological standpoint, this is my theory. I'd love to hear from what you guys think about it. From a theological standpoint, I think it's this. I think Jesus always takes our cultural morals and elevates them. You have heard that it was said, do not commit adultery. I tell you that if you lust after a woman, you've committed adultery. You've heard it said, do not murder. I tell you, if you hate your brother, you've committed murder. And so my theory, this is just my theory, okay? And I would love to hear you guys. I think the heart of God is, hey, you guys have decided that this 4-letter word and this 4-letter word and this 4-letter words are cuss words. But I tell you that you're giving an account for every careless word that's coming out of your mouth. You have heard that it was said, hey, you can't say S-H-I-T or F-U-C-K or doing da-da-da-da. But I tell you, let nothing unwholesome come out of your mouth, even Christian gossip, even flattery, even manipulation, even malice, even nasty comments, even gross rebuking in the comment section and flippantly calling every other preacher you don't like a heretic or a wolf in sheep's clothing. Right now I'm digging. That's my theory on what the actual standard is, which, if we're all honest, pushes us back onto grace. Right? Because if hate makes us murderers and lust makes us adulterers, well then shoot, speaking flippantly and carelessly makes us very unwholesome people, and we're going to have to give an account. And if I have to give an account for every idle word and I stand condemned by all my careless words, well, gosh darn it, I'm deserving of the wrath of God, right? Like, my mouth is deserving of just hell, because it's been used to bless God and curse people, right? And so that's kind of my position, and it's changed since becoming a father. Now, I'm probably a lot like Trey. And by the way, this isn't something that I'm like perfect about. When I play basketball, I get frustrated and I say, gosh darn it, fudge, right? There's still filler words. There's still careless words. I shouldn't be saying them. And sometimes I do mess around and say the actual word in that context, but I know that my mouth isn't the way that I'm getting into heaven based on what words I did or didn't say. And I know I am just as much in needing of God's grace. And so that's kind of my working theory, which is like everybody's condemned. Like, we're all condemned. However, we all are got grace. Like, we all have immense amounts of grace, and it's not by our works or by our words or by what we didn't do. So that's kind of my theory, and I would agree, like, this is not something that I like worry about, and I really have made an effort to not use profanity. So what do you guys think? That's kind of my position. I'd love to hear from you guys. And again, I don't disagree with anybody. It's just kind of where I'm at with the whole thing.
Yeah, I would agree. And I would double down on that, right? And that when you talk about like the process of progressive sanctification as we should be growing, right? There are different stages in our life where we kind of encounter things that make, our accountability, our visibility, public platforms that are different, right? Like, and people they were like, we want to hear Pastor Roy's opinion on the N-word. Mm-hmm. But like, my video was about the fact that one of the things that convicted me about using the N-word, because I used it up until the beginning of last year, regularly as a part of my speech. And honestly, most of the people around me still do. But it was the conviction of the fact that I wouldn't want my children to say it. And that was literally, because I don't use profanity or whatever else, it was the only word that came out of my mouth that I would be embarrassed if my children repeated it in public. So I was like, I'm not going to say it, right? So it's the same reason why, and even with profanity, like, I was in the Navy. So literally the term is cuss like a sailor. And I was in the Navy, but I didn't use profanity the entire time I was in the Navy because I didn't have to, right? But people started, and it was funny because it created opportunities for me to witness or to share my faith, because people would inherently ask me, and they do this in a corporate setting now, because people think sailors cuss. Everybody cusses, right? Like, I'm in executive global division management meetings with people dropping F-bombs, right? Like, but when I don't do it, it's funny because people start apologizing for cursing around me. And I'm like, I didn't say, like, I'm not offended by language. I'm a grown man, right? Like, I don't care what words people use. But where I think Christians are getting it wrong a little bit is that Christians are, even if we have that cultural standard of what we think wholesome language is, we get offended when the world uses it and use it as an excuse not to engage in conversation and in community with people who may be either baby believers or non-believers in general, right? So you're offended by somebody's language. So it's, so like we take offense to the language instead of loving people. And then we use that as an excuse to why we don't love and connect with, because when you go out into some communities, it's just different, right? Even culturally in America, you look at Irish and Italians and stuff like that. You like people have a different even understanding of what's a culturally acceptable word. But if we're using that as a reason to put a barrier between ourselves and other people, then that's an issue, right? Like when and the one thing I tell, and I say it to all my mentees, and most of the people from my Patreon community have heard me say it, you got to listen past being offended if you want to be able to have the permission to evangelize into somebody's life.
It's good.
So somebody might say something you don't like, but you need to keep listening, whether that's apologetics or somebody sharing their story, or they disagree with you, or they use language that makes you uncomfortable. Like if you out there, you trying to be a light, then of course you're going to come across some dark comments, but be a light. Like, you know what I'm saying? Don't be a punk and be like, you're using profanity, I can't talk to you. Like, I don't care what people say. Like, Jesus is still Jesus. Use whatever word you want to. I'm going to get you with this word. I don't care which words you were using.
Well, let me give a case for using strong words.
Okay.
There's been times in my life, like my spiritual director, I talk about him often on my channel, but he's done so much for my own life. And there's been 2 times where he's used, he cussed.
Okay.
And it like was very profound for me. It was like super helpful for me because I think it's a way to cut through the crap, right? And really get to the heart of something. And so like, I've been reading through, because everybody in January and February was reading through Genesis, and I've recognized like, man, all throughout the Bible, words are so powerful. And they really are like weapons for us, right? Proverbs says death and life are in the power of the tongue. And so Paul, you gave a lot of examples, but even Romans 6, chapters 1 and 2, they said, should we, go on sinning that grace may abound? And he replies, meganito, which a lot of people just translate it as by no means. But I learned in seminary that it literally means hell no. Not literally, but that's what it essentially is. Because Paul is saying, listen here, you need to hear this gospel truth. I see Jason's face.
You just cussed for the first time ever.
For the first time ever, right? So it really is like he's really trying to get a point across. And I think when you're a good leader and when you understand the right context, it's really important to use strong language when it matters and when it can really penetrate into the heart. So like this is the question I've been asking myself even for like my channel, not with cuss words, but just the power of words and type of stuff to talk about is this question. Am I grabbing a tension or am I just grabbing attention?
Ooh-wee. Okay, hold on. Just that's a bar. We just got to stop and pause. Second question, Romans 6 what? Romans 6 what?
1 through 2.
Romans 6, 1 through 2 says, what shall we say then? Shall we go on sinning so that grace may increase? By no means. We are those who have died to say, how can we love any longer? So what you're saying is by no means would translate closer to hell no?
It's like they would have understood in the Greek, this is dramatic language. He's like cussing here. The closest thing my professor said, it's kind of like saying today, hell no.
Okay.
So it's dramatic, in your face. Listen, this is an important truth, and I'm going to be kind of dramatic so that you understand how important this is. Okay. Wow. So I think with leadership, everything's about tension. Communication's about tension. You're supposed to expose that tension. You're supposed to hold it there, right? Because that's what gets people to change.
Right.
Without tension, nobody changes, right? Tension is where people grow. So I think sometimes when we're using that language, it actually elevates the tension in the room and it grabs people's attention in the right way. So that's why I think sometimes it's helpful. We saw Paul use it here in Romans 6 too. But that's the question that we have to ask ourselves when we're using language. Are we doing it just to get attention, just for all eyes on us? Because that's, I think, when most of the time when people are cussing, that's what they're doing. But sometimes in those really rare moments, it's to really grab, again, notice the space here, a tension, and it grabs people and it causes people to look at the world differently.
That's
like,
good.
I think words are so powerful. I say a lot all the time, talk isn't cheap. It's how God saves his sheep, right? So this is in the positive and the negative. We have to really be mindful of how we use our words.
Wow, that's good. That's good. That's really good. That's interesting. I got to look into the Blue Letter Bible and look up that passage. I've never heard of that specific word being so dramatic. So that's good.
When it comes to language, some people have said, language is important because out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. I think there's a difference between language and words.
Okay. Language
are tools. Words are what you use to communicate. So words are things that do have spiritual essence. Language is just language. Mm-hmm. Language is what we use to create words. So I think when it comes to profanity, I mean, some real honest talk on this. There are strong words. There are words that are strong and they get your attention. I mean, no doubt if your pastor got up this week and said DAMN, there's an N on there for some of y'all. That was a learning moment. But if he gets up and says DAMN in the middle of his message, it's going to get your attention. Mm-hmm. That's not even, that won't be a cuss word in 10 years, mm-hmm. But it'll grab your attention. It's going to jolt your system. I think there's use for that. As a matter of fact, I probably will never cuss in a message. Mm-hmm. When I preach. However, if I'm sitting at a table with pastors, mm-hmm. it is almost without question that I'm going to drop some kind of profanity. And the reason is because typically when you get a bunch of pastors at a table, there is a exceptional amount of pretension, not because pastors are pretentious, but because we're all in the same field. We're all professional colleagues that are on some level in competition. I know everybody says, we're all on the same team. Woohoo. Yeah, well, on some level we are in competition. And you feel that when you're in a room with a bunch of pastors. And if you need to get people's guard down, I found one of the best ways. I'll drop a cuss word. It throws everybody off. They weren't ready for that because they were all going to inflate their numbers for a couple of minutes. And I just hit them with a cuss word. So I think strong words are good. I think there's also, though, they're inappropriate words. They're inappropriate words that you should not use in a given situation. I'm not necessarily talking about phrases in the spirit, but just the language. There's inappropriate words that you just shouldn't use. But then there's also unacceptable words that you just should never use. Okay. You just should never use. It doesn't matter. This is something that we deal with down here a little bit. There is a segment, believe it or not, of our state. It's down in Miami. I'm not going to act like I don't know where it is. It's down in Miami. There are a lot of white people down there who are just used to a very mixed culture, white, Hispanic, black. Everything's down there. Mm-hmm. And when I say Hispanic, I should just say Cuban. I don't even know if it's actually Hispanic people down there. I think it's just Cubans in Miami. I'm not sure. But when we're down there, a lot of white folks come out of Miami thinking it's kosher to say the N-word. They don't know down there. It's so normal. They don't know that that's an unacceptable word.
That's good.
That's an unacceptable word. And I'm going to be honest with you. I could listen to a black comedian say the N-word 750 times and work in 3 article adjectives and be completely comfortable with it. If I hear a white person say the N-word one time in 10 years, I am distraught.
Yeah. No, that's good.
And it's unacceptable words. What's funny is I would have never, until a minute ago when you said that, Roy, I would have never thought to myself the N-word as a cuss word. I would have never thought that's a cuss word.
Interesting.
But I also would have never thought that SPIC, I never would think that would be, either one of those would be appropriate words. They're always unacceptable words. And so I think the language that we use is important. But at the end of the day, if we come back to cuss words, just using cuss words, I think if you evaluate the language you use over a lifetime, I think you will find that the least troublesome things in your language were the cuss words you used.
Whew. That's a bar. Wow. Okay. Any other final thoughts before we get out of here, guys? That was a whole lot, Jason.
Yeah, I would just say from an outreach perspective, right? Like my ministry, for those that don't know, from a pastor perspective, is I largely pastor unchurched people because I don't particularly care for church people. So we can do an episode on that at some other time. But so with that, right, there's also, when we're talking about what's acceptable in culture, and Ruslan, you said it earlier, then the question is, what culture are you talking about? Right? Because Jason just like in Southern Florida, there's a culture. In Northern Florida, or the dirty Southern tip of Georgia, as some people call it, right? There's a different culture. And then but there's a culture in Southern California. There's a culture in Northern California. Yeah. And even with that comes a language, right? So if you're effectively going to be evangelizing and be on mission, you can't Trey can't be out here trying to minister to Mormons and not understand some of the language that they're going to use, right? And what an elder means to them versus him who's in the Southern Baptist Convention. Yep. So I think from that perspective, we need to understand language. I think we need to understand profanity and its context. I'm not saying we need to adapt it and be all things to all people, right? And just start using cuss words when I'm around these people and not around those people. But like I was saying earlier, but not being offended and then understanding the reality of like people are going to say things different ways. But at the end of the day, what we need to do with profanity is what are they actually trying to say? Right? Like if somebody ran up to you and everybody here that's in ministry and started explaining to you a situation in which they were abused, but that description is laden with profanity and cuss words, am I going to be like, hey, watch your language? Or am I going to listen to the fact that you were abused or mistreated, right, to kind of take it out of that? And I kind of have to do that naturally because I work in the service industry. I have my entire life, right? When the person comes and they cussing you out about their food being messed up, or they're cussing you out about their service being down, or like most people would have been treating Rochelle from Cox with their Wi-Fi not working, cussing out the person at the internet provider. And she's just on the phone like, but what are you actually trying to say to me? Right? So I think a lot of times we can allow it. If we emotionally respond to the language that people are listening, we need to consider others more significant than ourselves. And if someone's choosing to speak to us, then choose to listen, regardless of what words they're using. And that I see that happen a lot of times when like church people try to minister to non-church people, or even when church people do outreach events, which is why my nonprofit tries to teach churches how to do outreach events, because most people don't understand the culture, and you make the people uncomfortable that you're supposed to be trying to reach because they say certain things or they're cursing, and then they can tell from your body language and your reaction that you're offended. But I'm like, why are you offended? It's just words. So like if we want to reach people, especially unsaved, right, and you think that's something that progressively will be sanctified out of people, then fine, then meet them where they are, right? And then listen to what they're saying and get the reality of it and move on, right? But I mean, at the end of the day, I want to say Christians need to stop being so sensitive. It's words, right? Like if profanity offends you, but racism doesn't offend you, hatred doesn't offend you, sex trafficking doesn't offend you, economic inequality, education inequality, like there's a lot of stuff in this world to be offended about. That's a lot more visible and definitive and dangerous than language.
Christina sent my super phone a question. She said, is "oh my God" a cuss word? Oh my God, a cuss word. I don't think it's a cuss word, but I think it's inappropriate personally.
I think she's asking, is that using the Lord's name in vain, right?
Yes.
Again, listening, I think that's what people would use when you use God in any context.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't think oh my God's that big of a deal, to be honest. I mean, frankly, God's not his name. He's got a bazillion names listed in the Old Testament, and we chose the one that just describes what he is in his entity. And so, he is not actually God by name. That would not be on the Lord's driver's license.
But we're totally not with like my son saying that word, right?
Well, we're not either. Okay. We try to redirect.
Yeah.
Honest to goodness, though, I'm not redirecting them because it's inappropriate. I'm redirecting them because I'm going to take them up into church and somebody's going to be an idiot. So it's like, I got to try to save y'all from people who ain't got no sense to know, hey, why don't you not correct how my kids talk, seeing as how we've known each other for 7 seconds, but church people don't understand that. So some of y'all don't understand that are in the chat tonight. You got to understand that, man. You can't, some of y'all watching this you can't just go nuclear on everybody because they do something, and that's the deal. Y'all want to know, is cussing wrong? No, the way you respond to things is wrong. That's what's wrong. Are you responding to something that with using profanity at somebody, or are you reacting to somebody who's using profanity at you? You know, and some of y'all, nothing's good enough. Oh my gosh. Well, that's just substituting. Oh my God. Oh my. Oh, well, you just left it off. Oh my word. Well, the Bible says that Jesus was the word made manifest. I mean, some of y'all, the best way to talk to you is to block you on the internet and never acknowledge your existence again. So, you know, just, I think when it comes to, now I know that the person who asked this was asking a legitimate question, so this isn't directed at you.
This is a good question. If cussing is cultural, then is there any fundamental truth? I think what he's saying is absolute truth with language. If cussing is cultural, if four-letter curse words are all cultural, is there any absolute truth, absolute standards with language?
No, I don't think, other than, I mean, I think it's all cultural. It will be, you know, there will still be a variable to it. Like I said, I think there, you know, in your culture, you need to know what those unacceptable words are. I think you need to know what those inappropriate words are situationally, but no, I can't imagine that it's, you know, there are actual words you can't say. I mean, to be honest with you, we tame a lot of what's in scripture. I mean, you heard that, you know, that the word, what Trey talked about a minute ago in Romans 6, where, you know, the word is tamed down from what might be the original Greek, but we've even tamed English words. I mean, the King James talks about the man who pisses against the wall. That, you're not going to find that in any other translation.
Standing. You have to include that part. Have you seen that?
That's real important in your area because of that guy.
That guy's from Arizona.
Yeah, but I mean, it says piss. I promise you, in translations committees, you know, with the new King James, they were going, guys, I know it's the first day, but we're all in agreement, right? We're not going to keep piss. We're gonna change that, right?
So
I mean, even if you think about it, when Jesus called the Jews a brood of vipers, you didn't think they thought that was a curse word? Like that, like to Trey's point, that was a strong word, right? Yeah. To call somebody a snake to their face.
Yeah.
Most people would be like, that's disrespectful. But like Jesus said it, but it was also true. So it's right. So that's that very, I mean, there's absolute truth, the absolute truth that, you know what I'm saying, that the Trinity and God, like, but when we're talking about like interpreting things and, you know, what's the word for donkey, right? Is it a lift or an elevator? Like none of this stuff is consequential. And that's why I wouldn't say that you could make a hard line to say that profanity is right, that these words are profane and it's a sin issue.
Interesting.
Right? Unless you're talking about groups of words like Jesus is not God. You know what I mean? Like, I don't care what language you say that in. Like that's a profane statement, right? And then we haven't even touched on it with all this stuff going on when people talk about profane praise and profane worship that the Bible talks about. So you sitting around here singing a song because you love singing and actually have no reverence or awe for God. So you're not worshiping him. You're just enjoying people worshiping you. The Bible calls that profane.
Wow. That's good.
So
that's good.
You know, but yeah.
I think when it comes to absolute standards, my position would just be it's absolute in the intent. And it's absolute in how it's received by the person you're speaking out against. I think then there's the wisdom side of it, right? The wisdom issue of it, meaning that I do not use a lot of the words because it is a wisdom issue. I don't say, oh my God, any of that kind of stuff, because I think it's a wisdom issue. And then I also think that the standard is so high that I think we all fall short. So, Trey, take us out. Give us some good pastoral guidance on this, Pastor Trey. What will be the big idea that we close out with in regards to this conversation particularly?
I would take this even broader.
Okay.
In saying Dallas Willard's one of my heroes, and there's this long story, there's background to it, but essentially he was a professor at USC, and somebody tried calling him out, saying that he was dumb and all this stuff. And Dallas Willard just simply looked at him, stayed silent, and said, I think that's enough for today. Class is dismissed. And so people were like, why did you do that? Come on, you're Dallas Willard. You're the philosopher. You're the theologian. Like, he's a legend, right? And so finally somebody asked him, like, please, can you tell me, why didn't you just slam dunk on this guy? And he says, I am practicing the discipline of not having the last word.
Wow.
I thought that was really good. And I think that's something maybe a lot of us get caught up in those words. We get caught up in that anger because we are adamant we're going to be understood. We're going to be approved. We're going to have the last word. My presence will be felt. And I think the way of Jesus is letting other people have W's. You know what? That's all right. You know, I know where I stand. I know God has my back. I'm not going to keep fighting because that fight never ends.
Wow. That's good, man. Trey, I think that's the perfect way to take us out. I think there's a lot said. I think you guys all shared very valid points of view. And I think in a practice standpoint, I'm pretty sure from home to home, our day-to-day lives probably is not going to look much different, despite on maybe if we disagree on some of this. So, man, thank you guys. Wow, that was really good. Guys, hey, do me a solid. Make sure you guys go subscribe to all of their channels. Pastor Trey Van Camp. They're all tagged. Pastor Roy Dockery, Pastor Jason Mayfield, and they're all tagged on my channel as well. And I'm really grateful for you guys. Hopefully we don't have this issue. Thank you to everybody who gave super chats. Very appreciative for the Wi-Fi fund. Cox will be here tomorrow. We may need to get them to rerun the wires. But guys, thank you so much. This has been fun. I will be back tomorrow. If you want to partner with what we're doing, you could always do so on Patreon. Y'all have a good night. Joshua the King came down and bore it all. Yeah, conversations front of the fireplace. All of my mistakes, how do I erase? Wanna operate at a higher pace. Birth pains causing the body to dilate. On a first name basis with the worst pain facing. Moments in